Hello, my name is Harrison, and I'm going to show you how to configure a WhatsUp meter using our WhatsUp USB data logging software. These are important steps to follow before doing any experiment using our meter. So first you'll have our USB data logging software open. The first page you'll get to says Data Logging Wizard, and this is just going to kind of tell you what you're going to expect with the software. You'll click the next button, and at this point, you're going to want to make sure that your WhatsUp meter is plugged into the wall and powered up, and then you're going to want to connect our meter to your computer using the supplied blue USB cord. Make sure that both ends of the cord are firmly attached to your computer and the meter. At this point, you'll hit the next button again. Our software will test the connection between your computer and the meter, and once it shows that it's good, it'll tell you to go to the next step. Now at this point, the assumption is that you've just got our meter and you want to get ready for your first experiment. So you'll want to click the drop-down menu, Meter Settings. It's going to connect with the meter, and this is where you can set the meter for anything you want to do within the scope of your experiment. So we'll go from left to right with the tabs. The tab all the way to the left, Rates. This is going to show you, this is where our meter can calculate your cost of whatever appliance it is that you're measuring. So generally what you do is you'll find your electric bill, and up here where we're located, we're paying 14 cents per kilowatt hour. So we've entered that data in. Once you make any changes to the meter, so we've put in 14, you're going to want to push the Send Settings to Meter. This is important with any setting changes we make. Duty cycle, what this is for, this is a calculation that shows the duty cycle will tell you when, for example, a refrigerator air compressor is coming on and off. The reason that we can set a duty cycle threshold is using the example of a refrigerator. A refrigerator generally has a light that turns on when the door opens, and it also has a compressor which keeps your food cold. Now with our refrigerator, the light bulb runs 40 watts and the compressor runs about 200 watts. So with the duty cycle, you're really only interested in knowing how often the air compressor is coming on. The light bulb isn't really relevant. So we have our duty cycle set for 100 watts. This way, anytime someone sets the door, it doesn't trigger a duty cycle. But when the compressor comes on, our meter will know that the refrigerator is going through another cycle. When you go through data, you'll see the duty cycle column, and it will tell you, in the case of refrigerator, how many times your refrigerator came on during a given study. So we can set this for any value we want depending on our experiment. And again, once you've made any changes, you're going to hit Send Settings to Meter. The next tab is Memory. Now memory, there are 3 different options: Stop, Overwrite, and Automatic. Stop means that once your meter memory is completely full, the meter will stop recording values. If you're doing an experiment, generally this is going to be your safest bet in terms of keeping valid data. Any of the other options, you run the risk of having an overwrite happen. So usually if you're doing an experiment and you want to collect your data, we recommend Stop. Overwrite feature simply means that once the meter gets full, it will go back to the first record and begin overwriting. Automatic can be useful if you're starting an experiment and you're not really sure how frequently you want to sample data. What Automatic will do is it will start recording at 1 second intervals. Of course, our meter can record up to 1 second intervals. And once the meter memory is full, it will go back and overwrite every other record so that it'll go to 2 second intervals, and it'll continue to do this. And what the purpose of this is it will give you the maximum data granularity, the tightest data granularity possible given the length of your study. So these are the 3 different options. And again, if you make any changes to any of these, you're going to want to push Send Settings to Meter before you do this. Now, some of these options, as you go ahead to make a change, will give you this warning message. What it's simply telling you is that it's about to clear all the data on the memory. This is fine, assuming that you're getting ready for an experiment, but just make sure that if you make any changes, that you know if you've already collected data, that you've already saved it to the computer, or you'll end up losing it doing this. So the next tab is Logging. Now, for those of you who are using a .NET meter, this is very important. Our .NET meters, which report to the internet, here is where you select whether it's recording data to the meter memory, internal meter memory, or whether it's going to push it through the Ethernet port out to our website. Right now we're looking at a Pro meter, so I don't even have any options here. If you don't have a .NET meter, these will be all grayed out, and you can just go ahead and skip this page. Next tab is interval. So our meters can read up to 1 second interval. So we can fine tune down to 1 second, or you can configure this to do as much as you want. You might want to do 15 seconds. You might want to do, if we're doing, you know, a light bulb in someone's bedroom, for example, and you might only want to do it once every 15 minutes because you know, the light bulb goes on, they're in their room for a while, and you know, these are, so every experiment's a little bit different. But what's really nice here is as you change the interval, you can see the duration right down here is changing. And this is really useful because you can figure out how, if you know that you need to study something for 24 hours, then you can figure out what data granularity you can achieve within the bounds of 24 hours. So the next tab over, the last tab here is and actually again, we want to make sure that we always are pushing send settings to meter anytime we make any changes. And here's our warning again that we're clearing our memory, that's fine. Last tab here is logged items. Our meter can log many different items here. We got watts, volts, amps, watt hours, cost, and that's a cumulative cost. We have monthly kilowatt hour monthly cost, and those are simply taking the data and spreading it out over a 30-day period, so you can figure out how much this is taking up on your electric bill. And again, we go through all these. Generally speaking, we recommend at a minimum that you record watts, volts, and amps, and then power cycle is very important. Power cycle will start at 0, and if there's a power failure during your study, when the meter comes back on, power cycle will increase by 1. This is really useful because a lot of times data comes back rather confusing, and you'll see that power cycle has increased by 1, and this means that there was a gap of time where there was no data being collected because there was no power delivery. Now, one thing to note here is that as you deselect some of these, so let's say we get rid of minimum watts and minimum volts, I'm going to send settings to meter. If we go back to interval, we'll notice it. Well, I'll change this down to 1 second so it's more obvious here. But right now we're showing 30-minute duration. If I go back to logged items and I get rid of a couple more of these, hit send settings to meter, we'll go back and we'll notice that now we're up to 57 minutes. Now this is because by logging fewer items, each record will store less data, so we can collect more records. These are things to know as you are dialing in your meter for an experiment. You're going to want to, you know, adjust these to capture the right data to get the length of your study just right. And you know, you can dial it in either with your interval spacing, or you can dial it in by adding or removing some of these features. So these are the real important things to know when configuring a WhatsUp meter.